Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to not showing the correct screen here. Welcome back to the RENNSPORT Nordschleife League for the first GT3 race of Season 2 actually. Today we have a pretty high strength of field in today's race and also possibly a good surprise. But of course, all brought to you by me and Tim Island as usual.
Hello everyone. Hello people on Twitch. How are you guys doing today? Thanks for coming and watching. Yeah, it's a pretty stacked grid we've got here today. There's some pretty high ratings and a pretty good standard of rating across the board, so I'm hopeful for some good racing action.
And I'm sure we will get that. We already noticed a bit of a wild card in this race. We've got 12 drivers most of you will already know, and one driver you, and also us, don't know yet, which I'm very much looking forward to see how he will do. But we are right now in qualifying. We are watching Alizaya, the first car out on track in the AMG MSI. So yeah, game for the pole today, possibly more crucial than ever.
Yeah, maybe. It's like we've been saying, it's a pretty decent grid, so that the fight for the pole position should be pretty tight. And who can get the hole shot into T1 and then the left-hander afterwards will be, I think it'll be a pretty good signal to everyone else for what they plan to do for the rest of the race.
Yeah, 60-minute race today, not the longest, not the shortest. So you gotta play your cards right if you wanna have a good chance at winning this race. Oscar Van Hood trying the new look on the AMG, the Virtual Championship livery, which of course took place earlier this week. So yeah, some new colors, some old colors, such as with Kimi Harpala in the EWC25 Porsche.
Yeah, it's old colours with a new twist, I think, is the EWC25 livery. Adds a couple of little bits, tweaks it here and there, but it's looking good.
Yeah, it really does. And actually we have quite the even split between Porsches and AMGs today. A couple of M4s in the mix. One of them driven by Julian Chicot, the other one by Piotr Zadaibe. We have an Audi and a Vantage. I think most of you can imagine who is driving the Vantage. But yeah, very, very interesting grid indeed here today. And also some car choices which I wouldn't have anticipated.
Yeah, we were looking at the roster before the race started, and yeah, there were some surprises thrown in there. There seem to be a few more of our regulars taken to the AMG recently. I'm sure it has got nothing to do with the fact that it's got great new sound and a load of new liveries.
Indeed. But we also see Dennis Kutzer switching from what he usually drives in an Audi R8 to the Porsche 911 with the Joshua Rogers livery, or the Corner livery. I think very interesting choice. I wouldn't have anticipated that. And actually the other way around, what we've also been talking beforehand, is that not only he is driving a Porsche, which we wouldn't have anticipated, but also, if I can find him, our defending champion. Because Dominic Ladler is also, as we see, Santi Tetra with some bigger damage to his car. But also Dominic Ladler is using the Porsche today, which usually he of course uses the BMW.
Yeah, I know when we started doing the Nordschleife stuff, I think he started off with the Porsche, and then there were some car changes, and he decided he preferred the M4 because it was a bit more stable and a bit more predictable. But he seems to have worked his way back to his old favourite Porsche.
We will see that definitely in the race. Tim Schroeder, back in the AMG, I think that's been his car for a long time, but with a different color, of course. Going for purple instead of the green here. And you said it, the new sound, of course, a huge selling point of taking the AMG here today.
Yeah.
But we are roundabout at half the lap, and Tim Schroeder going very wide onto the rumble strips here in Mutko. He's really pushing the car to its limits. But yeah, we are roundabout half through the lap here in qualifying.
Interesting point, which is maybe why you couldn't find him so easily. Dominic Ladler seems to have DNF'd in qualifying.
So it's not taking not taking a timed lap here. Tim Schroeder just ran a bit wide out of the carousel. But yeah, then let's talk about the bit of a surprise driver, the other Dominic in the room, or on the track, who's also struggling in the carousel right now as we switch to him. But our lone only on track is driven by Dominic Englert, and we haven't seen him before. We just looked up his profile to have a look at what kind of driver he is, and well, having 3 wins in 5 races already says something. Having those 3 wins in the R1 series is another. And he looks pretty fast in this Audi on this track.
Yeah, he seems pretty composed. He's throwing it around. He doesn't seem too scared of it, which is always good to see. And he seems to have pretty good pace in practice. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do on track.
We had some upsets earlier this season and also in previous RNL seasons. So it wouldn't be the first time we see something like it, but I'm always all for it. I think some of the most notable ones were Pascal Jordan in the BMW M4. But also what we've seen last time around, where Enrico Bräuninger had to fight through quite a bit of previously unknown names, such as Jafar Style.
Yeah, we have had the occasional kind of new guy pop up and throw a bit of a spanner in the works for the regular drivers, and it's always good to see someone new putting up a bit of a challenge and knocking a few heads, throwing the regular order upside down a little bit.
Kimi Hapla should be the first to set a lap time here. Coming around Hohenrhein and onto the front stretch. It's an 8:01 for Alizar and 8:07 for Kimi Hapla. It's a very good benchmark Alizar put down there. Not sure where Warren and Hood is. He just came across the line, slotting in between the two. Tim Schroeder, 4th fastest with an 8:11. Enrico Bräuninger just in front of him. Cesco Monuera, one of the other Honda Porsches out on track here today. What can he do? It's an 8:38. Piotr Zadaibo should be the last car across the line for now. We have Santi Tetra still out there on track with the damaged car. But the running order is Alizar and Warren Den Hood on the front row. Where have we seen that before? And then it's Kimi Hapla and Enrico Bräuninger in hot pursuit of those. Of course, then Tim Schroeder, Dominic Englert actually putting it in 6th in front of Dennis Kurzer and Piotr Zadaibo. Cesco Monuera 9th, Santi Tetra will start 10th, and then of course we have the drivers who couldn't finish a lap, those being Radoslav Piwonkiewicz, Dominic Ladler, and also a 3rd driver.
I think it's Julian Chacot.
Indeed, the Katowice Audi, the Katowice BMW, also a driver who usually drives Audi, who's not going for the 4 wings here at the Nordschleife. But yeah, Ron and Ali into turn 1. What do you expect? What do you think we will see?
What do I expect? I don't think either of them are going to go easy on each other. I think I'm going to leave it at that.
I think that's a good way to put it. It can end up in, let's say, a lot of action. But if you think to the Spa race last time around, it was a pretty fair game between the two of them. Hard racing, but good racing.
Yes. That's what I'm hoping for. We all want to see some hard but fair racing. They've got an hour to go, so it isn't. You can't win it on the first corner, but you can definitely lose it. So I just hope they give each other the space, make sure it's a nice fair race from there on. There's plenty of corners left to go.
And we shall see what will happen in just a moment time. Of course, we have the rolling start again. And that, of course, also mixes things up a bit. I think it's very interesting to have the likes of Chico and Lala starting quite far back in the grid. But yeah, some surprises definitely to be had in this race. And we may see some Tim Schroeder flashing as well, with him starting in 5th.
I already have on the grid, I've got to admit. He's been starting as he means to go on.
I wonder where the Tim Schroeder flash, on which track it originated. I think it might have been Hockenheim, back in the first season of RCL. But it
I couldn't
is
say for
quite
sure, but I guess Hockenheim.
It has been quite some time since then. But we get rolling onto the grid. The two black AMGs, followed by a golden Porsche and Enrico Bräuninger back in the Shark livery, which is also interesting. So some old colors for the Vantage. As Alizai will lead them towards the green lights. And we go racing in the Nordschleife RNL Season 3, Round 3 is a go. And of course Alizai with a good jump off the line immediately. As Ronin Hood has to fight both Enrico Bräuninger and Tim Schroeder into turn 1. Kimi Harper already losing 2 positions. Dominik Englert, oh, and Ronin Hood I think got spun round there by his fellow countryman, who moves up into 2nd position. Englert into 6th. Ronin Hood with quite big front end damage. And also I think Dominik Ladler being caught up in some of this, also having some front end damage to show for it. So not an ideal start for the two, our championship leader. As Kimi Harper is going very deep. Oh, and again, contact between Ron and this time Englert. And Radoslav Pironkiewicz will be the one taking advantage of it. Going side by side and not quite close enough to get 5th, but still staying in 6th. So good start for somebody who also had to start from the back. Julian Chico up into 8th as well.
Pretty much a dream start for Ali Zahir there for all the wrong reasons, but he's now got a 2-second lead as they start to head their way into the Nordschleife proper. Got a smattering of pretty close gaps up and down the field and a bunch of people essentially out of position, so we're going up for some interesting overtaking moves, I think, in the next couple of laps.
Also, thanks for everybody tuning in to see this race. Julian Chicot getting very loose there in his BMW as Dominik Lala is sending it down the inside of Dennis Kurzer through Sabine Schmidt's corner. We go side by side down the hill. You don't really see that often.
No, and Dominic Ladler sporting a fair bit of damage to his right-hand side there, which I'll try and find out whether it's affecting his steering or not.
Oh, and Dennis Kurzer with a huge hit. We've seen that before. I think Dominik Lala was able to evade without any further issues. But very unfortunate there for Dennis Kurzer. Dominik Englert seemed to have recovered. We see the front end bumper of Enrico Bräuniger's car lying around. So he had a massive shunt. Very atypical for him.
Ladler's steering seems pretty straight, so he's not too bad on the steering front. It all really depends how much it damages his top end speed to, I think, whether or not he decides to come in or not.
Meanwhile, Julian Chicot moved past Cesco Monera on a pretty nice move. Even way before the Schwedenkreuz. And yeah, nice to see some action also going on in chat. And also, we have the return of a RENNSPORT fossil, we could say, in Adrian Lunio in chat, who of course won an RFL season back then. So nice to see you. Dominik Lada now also on the back of the Spaniard. And already having a look down the inside, going into Metzgersfeld, and he does make a move. Dominik Lala on a mission here to defend his championship lead. Engert's car seems to be working just fine, just sliding a bit wide here, but doesn't seem like there was too much damage carried out from the contact with Rondon, who of course also has that big hole in the front end of the car. And loses it and hard into the wall, and yet again into the wall. And that
sliding side impact there. Hopefully won't affect his car too much.
And Dominik Lala on the back of this 3-car train. All within just a 10th of a second, has the better exit. Julian Chicot is trying to look down the inside of Radoslav Pironkiewicz. Dominik Lala meanwhile is going around the outside. Now the slipstream, of course, from the BMW. Pushing Radoslav Pironkiewicz clear of Dominik Ladler. And now trying to get past himself. As we continue side by side. Dominik Ladler on the outside of Pironkiewicz. Also makes the move down. Pironkiewicz loses 2 positions, but what a fight it is between the 3 of them.
It's some pretty scary high-speed corners to be doing that kind of antics.
We've seen how it can all go wrong, but this time we've seen how it is to be done. As Chicot runs a bit right in the carousel, Dominik Lada now getting ever closer.
Two interesting carousel strategies there of going around the top rather than the banked part.
Typically don't see that with a GT3, but... Dominik Lala definitely showing why he has won this many races and this many championships on this track. Because he's keeping the pressure high on Julian Chicot. And maybe... Oh, and Chicot now runs right. But maybe the switch to Porsche was definitely worth it now with the open setups. And up into 4th, Dominic Lala goes. But we also see that Kimi Hapler is very close to Tim Schroeder for P2.
Yeah, just closing in as they come to the Dottinger, so he'll be getting nicely in slipstream range.
Actually, what I saw on your screen is that he gave Tim Schroeder the Tim Schroeder flash, which is very interesting. But Alizar with the 4-second lap coming towards the end of lap 1. And Kimi Hapler can't go the speed of the Mercedes. Did Tim Schroeder maybe eliminate all downforce on the rear to have the top speed advantage here?
Yeah, this is an open setup championship, so that people do have the option of going low downforce for the extra top speed, and that AMG there was a beast on the straight, just slowly driving away from Kimi Hapler.
Meanwhile, Dominic Lala lost his position to Chico again, of course, due to that front-end damage, breaking very deep into Hohenrhein and not leaving much of a gap to Julian Chico. But now, with the slipstream, he may be able to do a move into turn 1.
He might be able to. He's definitely going to give it a go.
Going around the outside, getting the traction, and Julian Chico losing it in the traction zone, doing a bit of a 360 here. Catched it nicely, though. Reminds me of the 2018 fight between the Manthey Porsche and the Black Falcon AMG. In that 1-hour showdown at the end. Dominic Englert on the back end of Cesco Moreira after his little contact with Ron Den Hood, who of course unfortunately lost or has DNF'd from this race. Enrico Bräuninger in the pits in the meantime to repair his damage.
Yeah, he's got a pretty hefty stint in the pits ahead of him, so he's going to come out quite far behind these guys.
And there has been the question what exactly the Tim Schroeder flash is. Where we have this feature of flashing your opponents with the headlights or with the high beams. And there tended to be a time where Tim Schroeder was mildly abusing the button for it, resulting in almost a thunderstrike. And that's why we named it the Tim Schroeder flash if somebody is flashing very, very fast repeatedly towards the car in front. And currently, of course, the fastest car on track is Alizai, but I think he was also the only one not involved in any kind of incident.
Yeah, he was pretty clear at the beginning of the race after the little accidents going on, and he managed to just extend that lead another couple of seconds throughout the lap.
Cesco again finding himself with a car very close in his rearview mirror, approaching Flugplatz. But maybe now into Flugplatz, into Schwedenkreuz, out of Flugplatz. He doesn't go for it yet. He had a look, but you could hear the engine going down on revs. He was lifting there to keep a bit of a distance to the Porsche in front. As he catches the bump, keeps it out of the barrier though.
Yeah, that was a pretty impressive save, but he's got to do all that work again. I was just about to say he's doing a really good job of just keeping the pressure up, and then he made a little oops, and off the track he went. So the rare commentator's curse before I'd even said it.
Going to next levels here. Alizaya out front 5.5 seconds the gap. He is, after all, the technically driver with the most experience outside of any esport drivers. With 47,000 kilometers to his name.
That's a big distance. He's 47,000 kilometers.
It's roughly 1,828 laps of the Nordschleife. Of course, driven across various tracks, but
it's over a lap around the Earth.
That's true.
Circumference of the Earth is roughly 40,000 kilometers, so...
But he's got something to show for it, and that is driving away from the rest of the field. We won't talk too early about any race victories here, because we've seen him throw it on the last possible moment, flipping his car over at Mood Curve in the last lap, but...
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this lap finishing, so I can see kind of what lap times people are doing, but gap's kind of fluctuating a little bit right now. Dominic Ladlow, we've seen he's on a bit of a charge from the back of the grid, currently 21 seconds behind Kimi Harpler. Kimi a second behind Tim Schroeder. Tim Schroeder 6 seconds behind Ali Zahir. So let's see if Dominic Ladler can close up a little bit of that gap. He does seem to be doing pretty good, even with his damaged car.
It doesn't really seem to hurt his downforce as much as his drag, so of course you have the two differences. In corners in general he was super fast compared to Julian Chicot, of course then lost out the position on the Döttinger Höhe with that huge hole catching a lot of air. But without that he seems to be quite fine. Don't think it will be enough to catch Kimi Harpler if stuff doesn't change, who himself is struggling to keep up as close with Tim Schroeder as he did last lap, and we know that that AMG is mighty on the straight.
Yeah, you could see if he can maybe close that gap up a little bit and at least get a bit of a tow along and pop his max speed, his top speed up a little bit. But I'm expecting with no air drag assist, then the AMG should be kind of like walking away from Kimi Harpler.
Won't be long until we find out. But we also see that Engel is much closer again to Cesco Monera, and if he keeps it together now, he should be in a good position to take P6 on the Döttinger Höhe. Little jump here in Pflanzgarten. Everybody loves to jump, don't they?
Yeah. Especially in race cars. Watching race cars jumping is always fun.
Oh, and England losing it in the small carousel. Small hit there with the guardrail, but doesn't seem too bad. But yeah, just under braking. Easy to do.
Just lost him a few more seconds there, which I think will be the biggest pain for him, more than any kind of damage. He seems to have got away without.
Meaning Cesco Monera has some more breathing room, but we also got 6 more laps to go in this race. And Ali Zahir looks forward to leading those laps.
Yeah, just extending his lap out. Ali Zahir's last lap round was an 8:00.525, which is a pretty quick lap, and he's knocking on the door of getting to the 7 minutes. Tim Schroeder was an 8:04, Kimi Harpler an 8:05, Dominic Ladler an 8:11. So just losing out a bit of pace from Kimi Harpler, but he did a lot of work last lap. So let's see what he can do with a bit more clean air.
Kimi Harpler lost about 4/10 since we last watched him trying to chase Tim Schroeder, but of course there was the Döttinger Höhe in between it. I would have expected Tim Schroeder to pull a bit more of a gap.
Yeah, he seemed to lose a bunch of the gap on the GP part of the track afterwards. I know when they first crossed the line, I looked at the gap and it was quite a lot bigger. So I don't know whether he oopsed up a corner or if he has gone low downforce, if Kimi's just able to do the twisty parts a bit quicker.
Englert actually coming into the pits, repaired some damage. Didn't look like too much of hit into the barrier, but of course we can only see from the outside. For Enrico Bräuniger, I'm not sure why he keeps bugging out a bit, but for Enrico Bräuniger, he last season finished 3rd in points with only 1 podium, so he was really consistent. So far this season right now, he's sitting in 2nd and 3rd in the points, which of course is probably going to change with this race, but it doesn't seem like it will end his chance at the streak, doesn't it? Typically somebody who you will find around about P4 or 5 in every race.
Yeah, not his best race, but he did pit, so yeah, he has spent some time in the pits. He can maybe sneak up a few extra positions, but he's gonna have to go some.
He's only 2.5 seconds away from Dominic Englert now.
Yeah, well, Dominic Englert is then 75 seconds behind someone else, so he's got a long way to go to make any more than that up, I think.
Of course, always the chance for somebody else to not finish. Somebody who we usually don't see not finishing, or somebody we usually see finishing, is this man, Piotr Zadajbel. Very consistent driver. Currently in 8th.
How many negatives can you say?
He isn't.
Yeah. Kimi Harpler seems to really close that gap up to Tim Schroeder. It's down to 1.4 seconds now. It's not close by any means, but it's a lot closer than it was at the beginning of the lap. So Kimi seems to be pulling something out of the bag here.
He's definitely making as much use of the Porsche as he can theoretically do. And every single bit of slipstream up this hill also does help. Of course, the Porsche still is a bit inferior to the AMG without a wing on it, basically. You could just detach it and probably would be the same for Tim Schroeder in this case. With this open setup, as you see Kimi Harpler showing us the Tim Schroeder flash again. But, yeah, it helps keeping just in touch for the downhill sections that are about to follow.
Yeah, any kind of little gain of speed you can get on the uphill really does kind of magnify as you go along, assuming you don't have to brake for someone. So any kind of little extra bit you can gain there is a real kind of like multiplier in closing that gap up.
Meanwhile, let's just quickly take a look at how the standings would be affected by the race if it would end now. So Dominik Ladler would still lead the championship, but only by 4 points compared to this man, to Alizaya. Julian Chico closing in a bit, but not by much. But getting past Enrico Bräuniger. And again, we will have a bit of a closer field between P3 and P6. So, yeah, some things will definitely move around. Alizaya could have a big points haul here from today. And sets us up beautifully for the last half of the season.
Yeah. Obviously, I'm sure you'll talk about the calendar at some point, but we're alternating between GT3 and not GT3 cars. So, wow. As if we're magic.
Magic of video production. But yeah, as you said, we alternate this time a bit different because we started with the GT3X, which of course is a bit different to the GT3. It was a fun race though, very different to a normal GT3 race, but certainly interesting in its own right. But next time we go to the BMW M2, and I don't think you need to say much about M2 racing. It always is a blast and very, very close. Of course, a Cup Series, and people just seem to forget any limits with those.
Yeah, I don't. Have we done an M2 race at Nordschleife anyway, with open setups yet? I don't think we have.
Not with open setup. The last M2 race we did, of course, was with Remco Meyer starting a bit further down and doing basically what Dominik Ladler did earlier this race.
Yeah.
Just punching through the field, one car after another, also doing that drift overtake through Mood Kurve. But yeah, M2 is already. We have some M2 leagues going. We had the one organized by Bruno Webeus, which was very popular. We have the current one hosted by Enrico Bräuniger, which sees a good draw of people and drivers to it. It is a very popular car.
But yeah, kind of the point I was, I suppose, alluding to is the fact that whenever we've done a Nordschleife race here on M2s, they've always been fixed setups as well as the same car, so they've been super, super close. But this time around, people can get to make a bit of a strategy call with their setup, which I think could throw some spanners into the works.
Indeed. And we don't know how setups will affect that car in detail. Could lead to anything, and Kimi Hapler is just 10th away from Tim Schroeder now. Maybe the Laurent setup also not too kind on his tires. With GT3s, of course, you start to slide a bit more.
Yeah, that is a thing I think with the setups is people won't have really had much of a chance to kind of test them over a full race distance. So what seems like a really quick setup in time trial might suddenly not be after 6 laps.
And right now we are only in lap 4. And of course now comes a very curvy section of the Nordschleife through... Oh, and Tim Schroeder very slow off the exit of Vedol as we go onto the Nordschleife. And now we go towards Hatzenbach, we go towards Flugplatz. Kimi Hapler down the inside of Tim Schroeder. We go side by side just like Dominik Ladler and Dennis Kurzer before. But Kimi Hapler not having the best exits out of Sabine Schmitz and has to slot in behind.
Yeah, a little bit losing the back end there. So he couldn't quite get the drive out of the corner that he wanted. So he's having to concede it for now. But I'll say it for now in air quotes.
Nose to tail through Quiddelbacher Höhe and now Flugplatz. Tim Schroeder goes a bit right onto the rumble strips again. As he goes onto the grass lose the... I'm not quite sure what that was about from Tim Schroeder. Maybe lost concentration? That seemed very odd from the Dutchman.
Yeah. Maybe driving a bit too much in his rearview mirrors there. Just got a little bit caught out by what was going on ahead of him.
And hits like those are also not good for the suspension, as you may imagine. Can easily change your steering angle by a bit.
Piotr Zadival currently in the pits, so that's promoted Engelhardt and Bräuninger to 8th and 9th respectively. That's put Engelhardt 89 seconds behind Radoslav Pionkovic. So there's still another lot of work to do to catch up to anybody.
Also, Enrico Bräuninger and Dominik Engelhardt seemed to lap pretty similarly in terms of lap time. The difference was about 7/10 last time around, since they exited the pits. And Radoslav Pionkovic, that is probably also commentator's curse, because I was just about to mention how well he runs in 7th, as he just put the car into the wall in Hatzenbach.
Wasn't me this time, yes.
Perhaps, but that will be a very painful and long lap back to the pits. And perhaps another position for both Engelhardt and Bräuninger. Seems to run much better for Cesco Moreira though, as he's also missing a front left bumper, but can continue in a much higher speed. But yeah, of course, that is always the big risk here at the Nordschleife. Just overpush it and put the car into the wall.
Looking at some last lap times, Ali Zahir only a 10th slower than his first lap. He's still on the 8 dead. Kimi Harpler 8:04, Tim Schroeder 8:05, Dominic Ladler 8:13, Julian Secur also at 8:13. So a bit of a spread in pace, but the people who were close together in pace are also quite close together on track. So that's good for racing.
It really is. So let's jump on board with our lone Aston Martin chasing our lone Audi here on track. And Enrico seems to be generally a bit faster. I think it's a bit opposite to what we usually see, because usually we see Enrico minding his own business and somebody being a tiny bit faster behind. This time it's kind of opposite around, where he gets to chase somebody. But you also see that cars are very spread across the Nordschleife.
Yeah, there's some pretty big gaps going on right now. But I think they're kind of close where it counts, which I think is the important thing. But yeah, Enrico Bräuninger not quite able to catch up to Dominic Engelhardt, but that does mean that they're making really good progress on the cars ahead of them. They seem to be lapping pretty quick.
Yeah, of course, the car ahead is Radoslav Pionkovic with damage and Cesco Moreira with damage, so maybe we'll see both of them in the pits. And of course, these points would help Enrico Bräuninger staying ahead of Julian Chicot in the standings as well.
Yeah, that's very true. Tallies are here having a monster race at the front of the grid that are now 18 seconds clear after 4 laps.
Really in a league of his own here today.
he seemed to have been a bit more down on pace recently, so it's good to see him kind of up at the top end and really kind of letting himself cut loose and put in some fast laps.
Just wanted you to have a look at the delta between Tim Schroeder and Kimi Harper here on the straight. It is crazy how much quicker Tim can go with the low wing setup, as it seems. But overall, if you look at the lap time, you see that he lost after letting Kimi Harper by. We don't know how much damage it really caused, but 4.7 seconds with Kimi looking faster beforehand as well.
Yeah. Yeah, if he has gone for a low wing setup, I think he'll be maybe questioning whether it was a good idea or not.
It is mighty for keeping our position, but whether it is for making progress in the race, stuff like this also doesn't really help, of course, but like he had a good start, starting P5 and moving up into P2, but if that wasn't the case, if he could have run in P2 to begin with, we don't know. Dominik Lala, however, coming from down in P11 to now be in P4 again. When he needs to do a comeback drive, he really does one.
Yeah, that's very true. He has got a gift for it. Ali taking it easy last lap and only doing an 801.5.
But also his best lap being an 800.5 is pretty crazy. It's faster than his qualifying lap time.
Yep.
Dominik Englert has also increased the gap to Enrico Boininger by a couple of tenths again, so seems to have found his pace back.
Yeah, that seems to fluctuate a little bit across the lap. We've talked about that a few times on the Nordschleife League races, where people are better at some sectors than other. And yeah, the gap between Englert and Boininger does seem to concertina a little bit at different points in the lap. Englert is only 11 seconds behind Radislav Pionkovic now.
Well, Cesco we are not coming into repair damage. Probably aware that the cars behind are quite far away. But for Radislav Pionkovic, of course, with the damage he has, very likely that he will come into the pits.
Yeah, I would think so. His car is none too healthy. In fact, Radislav Pionkovic driving very, very slowly down Dottingerhohe. So both of the cars making it past there.
I think he was actually slowing down to not risk the other two drives, which is very respectable to do. Of course, you are obliged to keep it in safe distance, but his car seems to wobble around a bit on the straight, so lots of front-end suspension damage as well. If you drive at high speeds, it becomes very unpredictable and he just doesn't want to take anybody out with him. So big kudos there to him for taking care of that.
Yeah, he's pretty right hand down when he was driving along the straight there, and like you said, it's got a bit of a mind of its own when your suspension's damaged, and the last thing you want is your car suddenly jinking one way and taking out a couple of other cars.
Oh, Piotr Zadybel losing it through Brünnchen. So probably another pit stop for him.
That was a nice recovery back onto the track, though.
You probably learn that just by driving a BMW. Seeing as how Julian Chicot did his 360. But since then he also seems to have a fine race. I should stop talking.
I've seen videos of people doing that on YouTube a lot.
Yeah, you don't really want to do it, but
It must be the best time. Otherwise, so many BMW drivers wouldn't do it.
If you have a 911 Dakar, then maybe. I don't want to change the under tray of your car if you do it with a type like a BMW or an Audi. But yeah, of course, incidents are part of racing, and sometimes we have races where people seem to oddly struggle with the Nordschleife, doing very atypical mistakes. If you think back to the Dominic Ladler spin in GT4 last season, which was very out of the blue in a season where he's been super consistent throughout. Or the aforementioned Ali Zahir incident with his rollover in Mutkurve. Not car-to-car incidents, but simply drivers losing their concentration or not being aware of something for a small fraction of a second and losing the car. And on the Nordschleife it can happen so much, because every corner is just its own challenge.
Yeah, it's very much a track that demands concentration from you, and an hour concentrating is tiring, and your mind does wander. So mistakes happen. I think it's part of what makes the races here so interesting now.
Yeah. Oh, and Tim Schroeder running right onto the curb. Actually, slight hit with the barrier. I think it's something similar that happened to Maxi Götz in 2018 or 19. This is also something I tend to do back then on race room a lot. For some reason, I just lost concentration at that very point and slid over the curbing on the outside so often that some people from the Nordschleife community over there coined it the Lino groove, which was just spinning it on the outside curb into Hohe Acht. It's not about being the best driver, but just those odd mistakes that can happen.
Yeah, it doesn't take a lot with the wall that close to you. Things can become pretty terminal pretty quick. A lot of people here have had some pretty good luck considering their off-track maneuvers, not causing too much damage.
Yeah, and of course the Nordschleife is just very different to most other tracks, especially here in Europe. I think you will get the most comparable tracks over in America, actually. Because those high curbs you have here, for example now on the inside here at Kallenhardt and also on the exit, they can be a bit of a blessing because they keep your car in line. But if you over push it and go over these curbs, you basically just have to get lucky to not lose the car or really know how to counteract the force the curb is putting onto your car. Sometimes it's useful and sometimes it can just really throw you off guard. You really want to avoid the curbs here on the exit of Wehrseifen, for instance. Just so easy to lose it over there. Whereas most other tracks, of course, especially here in Europe and in Asia, have very flat curves, which you can ride very aggressively. Also the Nürburgring GP layout, of course, has those. Just requires a very different style of racing.
Yeah, and obviously when they're designing these cars, they've got to design them kind of to be able to do things like the Nordschleife, but the main consideration is going to be what crops up most often, which is the very flat curbs. So they're not really so great at handling the massive curbs you have here at the Nordschleife, and so they definitely do funny things to the car.
Well, I think the only cars that can really handle those steep curbs without noticing would be those trophy trucks. Not trophy trucks, yeah, also trophy trucks, but like, you know, those jumps, those trucks that do the jumps in the races, which are pretty damn cool to watch.
Well, when they're going around tight corners, one of the wheels lifts off the ground.
Rallying is a good point, but I don't think even rally cars could handle an incline this deep without any issues. They are set up to handle potholes depending on the stage, but if you were ever at the Nordschleife in real life, then you will see how high those curbs really are.
You mean you weren't risking it in your car?
I wasn't actually driving yet. But we are on lap 6, so this and 2 more.
Yeah. Alizaya's pace dropping a little bit, which it's fine. He doesn't need to be on it every lap, going down to an 8:03 now. Kimi Harpler doing an 8:06. Tim Schroeder had that incident, so he's doing 8:25 this lap. I'm on the wrong screen, so I can't swap drivers. There we go. Ladler 8:15. Closed up the gap a little bit to Tim Schroeder, but nothing that he needs to worry about quite yet. With Julian Sakura in an 8:17. Perhaps might be interesting. Engler and Breininger doing an 19.9 and a 19.7 respectively. The gap between them currently 1.5 seconds. And 50 seconds behind Chestu Manera.
Yeah, they're slowly working their way towards more points for them. I just inserted the current positions into my smart program, which you wrote for me. Because I couldn't do that. And we see, if we take a quick look, or not.
I didn't write that part of the program.
No, that was me, that's why it's blown. But we see that the gap between Julian Zico and Enrico Breininger is just 1 point. Of course, outside of the top 6, 1 point equals 1 position as well. If they can overtake Cesco Monero, they would end this session on equal points.
Yeah, and it's not far back from that is Kimi Harpler either at 32, so that'd be a nice little three-way fight going on in the championship. And Chestu Manera also on equal points to Dennis Kurtzer, so if he lost a position, then that'd put him down equal with Tim Schroeder?
Yeah, it depends if he loses 1 or 2. If he loses both, he will be on 15. But of course, we also have the fight between Englert, who would make it into the top 16 here, and Enrico Breininger, because the gap is just 1.8 seconds. It could be one mistake for either of the drivers to decide this one. So
that's very true.
Could sway anyway. It's not set in stone. And for those 2-3 more laps to go, isn't too unlikely as well.
Alizar here still popping out the occasional purple sector as well, so he's not like off the gas right now. He still seems to be trying to keep his foot down.
You rarely see Alizar slowing down. Seems to
That's very true.
Feel very comfortable on the limit. He's not going over the limit often, but he seems to be very comfortable at getting close to it. And he seems to also keep at that limit very consistently.
He's very smooth with his steering wheel, and he never kind of puts excessive amounts of movement into it, which I think would be really good for looking after his tyres and probably making a slightly more edgy setup, but being able to handle it a lot easier.
What is the dive about to be lapped by Kimi Harpler as well? But he's still going. Getting out of the way very nicely. Kimi Harpler not even having the time to flash behind him. Tim Schroeder, meanwhile, we've seen him doing some mistakes, but 26 seconds back from the Porsche. And yet another mistake in Hua 8 as well. Seems to struggle a lot later on. And is this maybe opening the chance for Dominik Ladler?
Maybe.
30 seconds in 2 laps is a big ask, but if Tim Schreider's actually struggling with tires, which won't get any better, or as Enrico Bräuninger and Engert just switched positions. Engert losing it, exiting Arenberg.
Yeah, he just had a little trip to the grass, and Enrico Bräuninger, who was closing in on him pretty well, he got to almost a second gap between them. Just went cruising on by. Thank you very much.
Which of course now means
take that position.
He is equal on points with Julian Chico.
And 35 seconds behind Chestu Monero, which is a big ask in 12 minutes. But and on fastest lap pace, there's about 6 seconds between them. So it's not impossible for him to catch up in a lap and but he's still got to make a move.
Yeah, of course, more crucially, Cesco has that front left damage. It will cost him a lot of top speed as well. So maybe that's where Enrico Bräuninger has a bit of a chance. We don't know how much damage he still carries from his incident, since it was a frontal impact. It could have caused some engine damage. But doesn't seem to be too much the case, because he doesn't seem to be any slower than the cars around him.
His last lap was his fastest lap of the race, so whatever magic he's doing, it seems to be working.
Alizar almost having, well, not almost, but having the whole Grand Prix loop as an advantage to Kimi Hapler.
And speaking of fastest laps, Ali Zahi has just done his fastest lap of the race. Throwing all of my things about him slowing down up in the air. Just doing an 8:00.473.
Schroeder, meanwhile, 30 seconds back from Kimi Hapler. But Dominik Lala didn't really catch up to Tim Schreider. I think that is mainly due to the difference in top speed down the Döttinger. Tim Schreider, of course, with the fastest car down the straight. Dominik Lala perhaps with one of the slowest with that front end damage.
Yeah, on the fastest lap pace right now, Dominik Ladler is about 2 seconds slower than Tim Schreider. Tim Schreider's last lap should have been his fastest lap, but he must have been validated. And Dominik Ladler's lap was about 5 seconds slower than his.
You know what's interesting? That Julian Chico actually gained nearly 2 seconds on Dominik Lala the last lap. At this pace it wouldn't be enough to catch him, but maybe puts on some pressure from behind if he does a mistake.
Yeah, it's always something that weighs on your mind, isn't it, when you see gaps closing? You don't want that. The rational part of his mind sometimes gets overruled.
Good example here as well. You don't use the curbs in Arenberg. Maybe lean onto them a tiny bit, but you don't use them. They may look very inviting, but you sure don't want to fall for that. Meanwhile, you completely throw the car over the inside curb, going into Adenauer Forst. But also in here you see Alizai won't use any of the curbs because they just answer the car too much. Just leans onto the outside, but nothing more.
Yeah, we've got the Nordschleife before the death curb, so you can still use the one out of the foxhole.
But even with that, you have to be quite cautious. And you got the speed, and you gotta have the speed to jump across it, basically. think Versailles is one of my favorite parts on this track. It's just, I don't know how, but it is very rewarding when you dive down this late into the turn and then can make it round with the elevation changes and all that kind of stuff. Maybe it's just me, or maybe it's just because the Audi feels very well there, but I really like it.
Ali looking really smooth and composed here. He doesn't look like he's trying, but his pace is still pretty impressive. It's definitely a contrast to some of the other drivers we have who will make even a Sunday drive down to the shops look scary and dangerous.
The car bouncing all around, yeah, that's a very good analogy. Tim Schroeder now about to overtake Piotr Zadaibe. He's going well out of the way again. As you can see, Tim Schroeder making a Sunday drive looking very actionable. But no, I find this stuff very, very interesting in itself, and of course it kinda gives us a view onto tomorrow as well, with a bigger event coming.
I guess so, yeah.
So of course tomorrow we'll be having the Florida Beach 500, which will be about 2 hours, maybe 2.2, around Daytona with hypercars and GT3s. And it is an invitational event which you could qualify for in the last 2 weeks. Most of the drivers we see here are there as well. So I'm very interested to see how they will do at Daytona, and if Alizar is as composed there as he is here, he has a good shot at that race as well.
Yeah, he always seems to do pretty well at Daytona when we see him. Again, I wonder if some people might be going for the low downforce setups for the bankings and try and get those like hyperspeed sections in. And overtaking at Daytona is quite heavy on the drafting around the bank sections. So if somebody does decide to go low wing, it could make things pretty interesting.
Yes, indeed. And from the drivers who are here today, in GT3 we will see Dominik Ladler and Rico Bräuniger. We see, maybe Alizai hasn't confirmed yet, but I'm pretty sure he will be there, Kimi Harpala. And Maximilian Dehn also announced himself to be racing. Who, of course, I don't think I need to introduce him really. He's a pretty well-known name around here. And in the hypercar class, we see Cesco Monreal, we see Radoslav Pironkovic, Julian Chicot and Dennis Kurza, as well as some returning names or very well-known names in the community with Timothy Fritsch, Michael G and Fenton, but also Sasha Andrich, who we've seen quite some time ago, having agreed to race. So I'm looking forward to it. I think it's a very stacked grid. It's the first time we've done something like it.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a fun race, and it's you put a lot of work into it, and thank you for that, Lido. I'm going to really enjoy watching it and casting it with you. I'm pretty sure.
Well, I'm just reading the chat message asking about the slow lap time, and I have it somewhere. I'm just trying to have a look. Of course, the qualification didn't only go by lap time, so with enough rating you could also make it in. Out of the lap times that qualified on their own, it was in the GT3s a 1:46.01 in the end. So only 3 seconds slower than the fastest time overall in GT3, which on a 1:46 or 1:43 second lap. Not too big of a difference over a 2-hour race.
Yeah, and of course it's not your lap time over one lap that really matters. It's the lap time over the entire race. So we'll see what the positions are like at the end, I guess. But who does better, the ones who qualified through lap time or the ones who qualified through rating?
And of course, for everybody who missed out on the top split, there's also a publicly available version, so everybody can still enjoy this race format in the official contests tab. Meanwhile, we are on the final lap of the race. Julian Chico is 10 seconds back from Dominic Ladler, so another, I guess, 3 seconds he gained overall. At that rate, not going to make it past our defending champ.
Something I've only just noticed, I've no idea when that happened. Dominic Engelhardt is now ahead of Enrico Bräuninger again.
Oh, that is a good point. I also completely missed that. And we see damage to the front right and rear right of Enrico Bräuninger. So probably put it into the wall somewhere, but not too much because there are no body parts missing this time around.
And Engelhardt 14 seconds behind Chestu Manera. And his last lap was quite considerably quicker than Chestu Manera's. I think Chestu had a bit of an incident, but that time already down to 11 seconds now.
Yeah, I think Chestu has been lapping around like this since he picked up the damage, to be honest, on the front.
Yeah.
I think it was still the better decision to not pit when he had the chance to. Overall, he would probably be around where Radoslav Piwonkiewicz is now.
Yep, true. Well, Engelhardt closing in pretty rapidly. And also gapping Enrico Bräuninger quite substantially as well.
"28 seconds on the final lap between Aliza and Kimi Harpala. That is... I mean, of course, Kimi Harpala was stuck behind Tim Schroeder for quite a time, and actually the time between the two of them is now 41 seconds. So without the damage on Dominic Ladler's car, I don't think Tim Schroeder would be running on the podium right now with his setup. But yeah, that is quite the distance between him and the second place car.
Yeah, and Kimi Harpala had just done his fastest lap of the race at 8:02.858, so he's definitely not dropping the hammer. He's trying to catch up to Ali Zahir as much as he can. That's not what dropping the hammer means. So, yeah, it's not just that Kimi Harpala is kind of resting on his heels and letting Ali Zahir have things his own way. He's definitely trying, which... if you've watched Kimi Harpala racing before, you'd probably expect.
Yeah, also not one known for backing down. Meanwhile, Englert going past Cesco Munera for 6th. There's quite the big gap between Bräuninger and Munera though, so these two probably will stay in position. But also going on to their final laps. What will be interesting is whether Radoslav Piwonkiewicz will go a lap down to Ali Zahir. There's not too much time between the two of them left. And Ali Zahir also making it safely through Moodcore this time in the lead.
You brought it up after he'd been through there, not before, didn't you?
Yeah, deliberately. Was it Maximilian Dehn who we saw finishing with a very broken car because he had such a big lead he could retain it after a big shunt?
I can't remember, but it seems like something Max Dehn would do.
Of course, Max Dehn sabotaged in this first race by Kimi Harpala, which cost him his first place in that race, which in the end gave it to Dominic Ladler.
There's some pit stop sabotage going on there. A bit of mind games going on behind the scenes.
But it would be... I'm not quite sure. I could be wrong with this. I'm just trying to double check, but I think it could be his first Grand Slam in or on the Nordschleife. Taking quali, 3 points, the 0.4 fastest lap, and of course the victory. In Season 2 he came close in the final race.
He's just coming up to Radoslav Pionkovic now as they're heading on to Dottinger. Is Radoslav going to pull over and just let Ali Zahir past?
I think he does, but I also don't. I don't think he would need to. That AMG very fast. And that's how you use the flasher normally, ladies and gentlemen. But yeah, just double check through the other 2 RNL seasons, and Alizai indeed did not Grand Slam yet. He is about to do so now. Just 2 more corners to go, 2 more chicanes. Through Tiergarten, through Hohenrhein.
There's still time for me to ruin things, so I'm keeping quiet.
You keep quiet, so I do what I usually do and talk too much. Alizai is coming across the line to win round number 3 in Season 3. The first Grand Slam at the Nordschleife for him. Radoslav Pionkovic comes home in 9th, just behind. Can be proud of making it home.
It was a pretty dominant performance by Ali Zahir today. That was it was just impressive pace all round. Nobody was even really close.
Indeed. Kimi Hapler coming home in 2nd, not due to a lack of trying, but just because Ali Zahir was just too dominant here today, I think. And Tim Schroeder, did the setup work out? I mean, he ended up on a podium starting P5. He can be super happy with that. But he will come home in 3rd. Unless he does something weird, which he has done previously today. So I wouldn't bet my money on it quite yet. Oh, and actually putting in the wall at the last possible moment, but won't really hurt his performance.
Put it in the wall, though.
He has enough of a cushion.
Put it in the wall, do it at the end.
Indeed. And Dominic Ladler will come home in 4th. He was last after turn 1, if I recall that correctly. So great comeback drive. So. Junjiku again catched up by 3 seconds, but of course it was just a bit too much in the end. And Piotr Zadabe also finishing, collecting some more points. And then I think it's quite the gap to the cars behind. Englert on a good way to finish 6th. But Cesco Moreira and Rico Bräuninger, these two are only about 12 seconds apart. And I think lap times between the two of them are not too different now, actually. As we see them parking nicely on the Moser logo at the exit of turn 1. Unfortunately, not a Moser livery here out today.
No. And Tim Schroeder not joining in the fun and games. He's parked all the way up by the pit exit.
But also Dominic Englert, we've talked about it, or I was maybe hyping it up a bit at the start of the stream, but finishing P6 in this grid is very respectable on its own, but he showed that he really has the pace to drive against all those drivers we've seen here today, even without the incident fest we had here today. It wasn't crashes, but it was just people struggling a bit with the track itself, I think. And
yeah, I think there was. He was quick. He just needed a little bit extra polish, but he was pretty much there. He was definitely looking quick in practice, and he seemed to be able to keep up with some of the regulars fairly well. So, and like you said, it was like we said, all cast really. It's been a pretty well stacked grid with people with high ratings. So it's sixth is nothing to be sniffed at.
I really hope to see him back for at least the next GT3 race, maybe also the M2 race, who knows. He's really shown that he can roll with all of these guys, be competitive. So we always welcome some new competition. But what about the fight for P7? It is 5.6 seconds as we go through Galgenkopf. And I don't think that will cut it for Enrico Bräuninger, even though he's catching in quite fast on the straight. So we watch Dominic Englert. I'm already catching up to the wrong pronunciation. Dominic Englert coming across the line. And it will be Cesco Moreira coming home in 7th. And Enrico Bräuninger, last out on track, but not the last in the standings, also coming home in 8th. And there we have the standings. After race number 3, Dominik Lala only 4 points ahead of Ali Zahir, heading into the last 2 races. And then it's Julian Chicot, Enrico Bräuninger and Kimi Harpler just 3 points away from each other. And with a performance like Kimi Harpler's today, I think he has a good shot at the top 3 at the end of the season if he continues to drive the other 3 events.
Yeah, he had not a great start, I seem to remember. It was an hour ago, that was a while for me. But he really kind of fought back, and he had good pace today. He was definitely worthy of the position that he took, and it's promising for the future races.
Yeah, it really is, and also further down, very close between everybody. As I said, I hope we see Englert return. Rondon Hood with a very unfortunate race today, I'd say. And that also led to Pironkovic and Zadaire getting some good points to climb up in the standings. So, yeah, of course, RNL is going to continue in 2 weeks. We have the new season of the Community League starting next week. And, well, tomorrow, of course, the big event, the Florida Beach 500 at Daytona.
Yep, I will have my ice creams ready and my deck chair.
Well, it is summer after all, so why not?
Yeah.
Anything left from your side to let us know?
I don't think I've got anything to let anyone know necessarily. Just thanks for everyone who took part. Thanks for the guys who turned up in the chat and saying hi. It's always good to see you all. And I guess I'll see you all tomorrow.
see you tomorrow. Until then, goodbye.
Goodbye.